Welcome back, everyone. The anguish and desperate cries of the families with relatives on board Flight 370 are really difficult to watch. Many broke down today as word came out that all lives on the plane had been lost. Up until now, several weeks later, some had been hanging on to hope that their loved ones would still be found alive. Well, the last few weeks have been difficult for the families, to say the very least, but this clearly was the worst possible news. Join me now to talk about this once again is psychologist Erik Fisher. Erik, good to have you with us again. Before we get into the long road ahead of attempted healing for these families, I want to talk about the way this information was conveyed to these relatives ahead of the news conference through a text message. Now, you had a very interesting observation that maybe gave some insight into why a decision like that would be made. Just share that with us.
Well, you know, why they said they try to contact family members through the phone and more traditional means, I think we have two issues. One is the speed of information these days. They had a press conference coming up, but also if we look at how they've treated the people at times throughout, there were definite miscalculations in the understanding of the emotional process. And to me, there was a lack of sensitivity when they dragged the mother out who was, who was saying how she felt about how the situation had been mishandled last week. And now they send the text out to these families who obviously are grief-stricken. They're feeling exhausted. They're overwhelmed. They could say, well, hey, we notified them and now we can move on. So we have to look at what was the awareness or sensitivity of people in the government, in the industry, and are they really in touch with people?
It's bad enough to get this news, the worst possible news. I'm speaking for the families here, these relatives. But the fact of the matter is they're having to absorb all of this so publicly, in the public space, being scrutinized by the media. I mean, that makes it so much worse. Well,
emotions in that culture, again, are kept very close to the vest. And you have a situation where these people have been under a microscope and all their emotions have really been, it's like up for the world on a billboard. That has to feel extremely invading and betraying to them. So they have mistrust towards the government, mistrust towards the airlines, mistrust towards the media. And while they were able to use the media to push the government and the airlines to get some information or to push the process, they also, again, like I said, felt used by them through this process. The healing process is going to be difficult, but hopefully if they can use each other as a community and they've built bonds through this, can hopefully help them heal rather than continue to stay in their place of feeling victimized.
The process of healing, how much is that complicated by the fact that up until this moment in time, as we have this conversation, we don't know where the plane is. There are no bodies for these relatives to claim. How does that affect the healing process and ultimately closure?
Well, humans like to have something to touch. Even when somebody that we love dies from whatever means, it's hard for us to believe. It's surreal. We don't process it very well. So the fact that they want to bring a piece of the wreckage to land and have people be able to see it, touch it, feel it, it's been part of helping them have a physical closure. The other thing we have to look at, it does go down to the cultural ways that people deal with grief and the rituals in Asian cultures, at least Chinese cultures. You don't have a funeral for people younger in the families. You have them for the older people who died. So some of these parents who are grieving, this is their ceremony in some ways. This is their funeral, and there's very rigid rules. 49 days of grieving, they say. After that, you're supposed to put it all away and pack it up for something that you never truly Yeah, and that's been the culture.
Now, Malaysia Airlines is making plans to fly families to Australia once the wreckage is found. Is that the right move for these grieving families?
It's difficult to say right or wrong. For some who may need that physical closure to be able to touch that, see that, I think it's an offer to help them gain some sense, like I said, to say this may be their place where they touch their family member for the last time, even though it's a piece of wreckage. It's tragic, but like I said, it's part of the situation to help these people begin to move on with their lives.
And just one last question. I have a colleague who often says that closure is one of these made-up words, that there's never closure. And especially in something so traumatic like this. I mean...
Well, I agree with that. We do look at that word. I know that for people who have lost people in tragic circumstance, I just saw somebody interviewed who lost a family member on TW 800, and seeing them talk about that, what happened to them, and having this current event, it revivified all their emotions, and they were having a hard time getting through that discussion. So life will bring things back to us. To me, as an opportunity to heal our issues. And that's sometimes the gift, is that we heal in stages, and we heal at developmental levels, and we heal through the number of times where we're exposed to that if we allow ourselves to work through the emotions. And without proper guidance, that's the tough part.
Yeah, it certainly is. Erik Fisher, it is always so good to talk to you and get your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.